Like many of you, I had very low expectations, both before and after it took 15 rounds of voting to get Kevin McCarthy the Speaker's gavel. This is the man, after all, who rightly concluded that Donald Trump was morally responsible for the attack on our Capitol on January 6th, only to fly down to Palm Beach, Florida, and apologize to Trump before turning his soul over to the former president to do with as he will. Now that he's lived down to those basement floor expectations and handed over January 6th footage to right-wing performance artist Tucker Carlson, McCarthy has also solidified his party's status and himself as a benighted speaker, forever tied to a perhaps soon-to-be indicted former president. McCarthy's MAGA trolls, who effectively control him and the House, used a hearing of their government weaponization committee to drill down on the so-called Twitter files in an ongoing attempt to feed the right-wing fever dream that tech companies are conspiring to censor conservative content while hiding the, air quotes, truth about the Biden family. They called up journalists Matt Taibbi and Michael Shellenberger, two of many chosen to shill Elon Musk's narrative, who complained that Democrats were being mean to them.
This morning, we saw a stunning display of their attack of your character. We shouldn't be surprised. This is what the defenders of big government corruption do.
I often say that sunshine is the best disinfectant. And boy, after listening to you and reading the reports that I have, does our federal government need to be fumigated?
You don't want the American people to see what happened, the full video, transparency. You don't want that, and you don't want two journalists who have been named personally by the Biden administration, FTC, in a letter.
The Biden administration.
And you're saying they're here to help us. They're here to tell their story. And frankly, I think they're brave individuals for being willing to come after they've been named in a letter from the Biden FTC.
Joining me now is Congressman Dan Goldman of New York, a member of the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. You know, there's a desperation to Jim Jordan, I think, in the yelling. I know he does yell all the time. But what has, in your view, this Weaponization of Government Committee accomplished thus far?
Nothing.
Okay.
Absolutely nothing. I mean, we've been focusing on Twitter and this sort of misunderstanding of how the First Amendment works and how law enforcement works. I mean, one of the problems with this subcommittee is Jim Jordan and others don't understand how the FBI, the Department of Justice, actually investigates crimes. And one of the things I asked the witnesses today is, do you think it is a legitimate objective of the FBI to prevent foreign interference in our elections?
Yeah.
It seems like a pretty basic understanding.
Sure.
And they would not give me a straight answer. They would not say yes to that.
Right.
And so we're just dealing with people who are trying to make political points to undermine Joe Biden, support Donald Trump. And it's going to get worse in many ways. The hearing today was about what a private company did.
Yeah.
The First Amendment doesn't even apply to a private company. But we've now had allegedly these fake whistleblowers who are essentially bought and paid for by Donald Trump's allies.
Yeah.
They've actually been paid.
Yeah.
And that's who they're trying to trot. And so what is clear about this committee is that there is collusion with Trump world to try to launder misinformation in support of Donald Trump through an official committee of the House of Representatives, and that is dangerous, and that's abuse of power.
I was saying the other day, it's sort of like the dealers and the users are like the same people now, because what you have is you do have a misinformation universe that's real, that's dangerous, that we saw on January 6th will lead people to believe an election was stolen because they don't understand how elections work, right? But when you ramp people up with what they think is real, then you empower people who bought that same conspiracy theory genre, and then they're on the other side of the dais. They're going to try to prove the conspiracy theories are real. I'm going to prove that no one ever landed on the moon. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove the moon is made of cheese. I'm going to prove it because I have a conspiracy theory. If they're in the business of trying to prove conspiracy theories true, to link in the story we were talking about in the previous segment, if Donald Trump gets indicted, I cannot even imagine what the Weaponization of Government Committee would do with that, because I actually think a Weaponization of Government Committee is a good thing. We've seen the weaponization of the federal government. We saw it in the Trump Justice Department. I think there should be committee hearings on that. We saw Michael Cohen flung into prison, right, for writing a book.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said today. I said, you know, if you want to do a hearing on the government, weaponizing the government to prohibit the First Amendment protected speech. Let's bring in all the Republican officials who are banning books around the country. Let's bring in Bill Barr and talk about the fact that Donald Trump's enemy was literally jailed in order to prevent him from publishing a book. But here we are talking about Twitter. It's kind of it makes it a mockery of what, you know, we're actually trying to do. Those of us who came to Washington here to actually do the people's work, to think about our problems. And there are problems that we could address.
Sure.
I mean, the balance between law enforcement and the First Amendment with social media companies is a tricky, difficult problem
100%.
that needs serious thinking, not this sideshow that we're having. But you talk about conspiracy theories. This committee is made up of a bunch of conspiracy theories, and now they're trying to backfill the evidence. But there is no evidence.
Right.
There is no support for what they want to be able to conclude and what they've already concluded. And so we're getting these hearings that sort of are increasingly seems like some crazy circus that is removed from reality.